and welcome everybody back to our YouTube channel. I'm Brandon Page, Page Racing Engines, and today we're going to be continuing on with our project Orange Blaze engine build. And today we're going to be working on the short block. We're going to be measuring bearing clearance, getting rings gapped, all that kind of stuff checked, and hopefully get everything assembled into a complete short block. So just stay tuned and follow along for that process. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe, click the little bell so you get notified when we upload videos. Also, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then our website coming soon. We will have merchandise up there for purchase. We do have some here. You can always contact us, and we can work with you on getting whatever kind of shirts, hats, anything like that you want. So we'll get started. One thing I want to kind of show you, it's always a good idea. You may think that your bearings are clean, but you always want to clean the back side of them too, even right out of the packaging, because there's actually a good bit of dirt on there. So I'll show you that here as we're cleaning them, getting ready to install. So you can kind of see how much dirt's already come off the bearings. I'll show you just on wiping this one. There's that much dirt just from that one bearing. So they may look clean, but we always want to make sure that they're actually clean and that there's nothing going to affect our measurement. So you can see that one had a good bit of dirt on it. From what come out of brand new bearings. So on most of our rods, or any rod really, the manufacturer gives a stretch that they like the bolt to see. The torque spec just puts you inside that range. So the best way for torquing rod bolts is to measure bolt stretch. So we have our sheet here from Wiseco. Basically gives all the specs, and as we can see here, the bolt should be stretched to 5.1 to 5.5. And it should be approximately 85 to 95 foot-pounds. So what we'll do is we'll set up, we can measure the length of our bolt before we torque it, measure after it's torqued. We'll probably set up for 90 foot-pounds to start with, and if it's within that range, then that's what we'll torque them to. And this is how we measure rod bolt stretch. It's basically just a little indicator, and if you've ever wondered, that's what the little dimple is on both ends of ARP rod bolts. It's set up for being able to measure rod length, so that this anvil here and the indicator tip can seat inside the center of the rod bolt We'll take our first rod and set our indicator in there, and we can rotate our dial around so that it reads 0. And I always do this on pick one side. You can kind of see there's laser engraved numbers. So I'll set that as our first side and flip it around, measure it, and then I can use this little slider piece here, mark what the difference is. That way we can measure both bolts at the same time. Come back to our first side. You can see that that's just at the 5. And the other side is not quite 5. So we'll break it loose. We'll go up to 95 foot-pounds and see if that puts us within the range. Alright, now that we got all our bearing clearances checked, we're going to get ready and start gapping our rings. Just kind of want to talk to you all a little bit about that. But Total Seal provides us this little kind of cheat sheet. It kind of tells us how to gap them. So we are going to be setting up for the high boost, 30 plus pounds, alcohol, and that is bore times 8 thousandths. Will tell us what our ring gap is. So pulling out our handy dandy calculator, our bore size times 8 thousandths gives us 33 thousandths. So we'll set up our top ring for 33 thousandths. We'll probably do 33, 34-ish on the second ring. And then obviously our oil ring support rails, we're just going to check and make sure there's at least 15 thousandths gap. There's no critical gap on them as long as they have at least 15. So I'll get to set up and kind of show you all how we measure our rings and then how we actually set up and grind them. So we'll take our top ring, we can kind of get it positioned in there, and we can take our tool, extend it out so that it's tight fit on our cylinder, and we can use that, and since it's not going down, you can kind of clearly see, I'll try to show you, that our ring is currently butting. So that means that we've got to cut minimum 30 thousandths. So we've got this handy dandy powered ring filer that Total Seal makes. So we can kind of set our ring up. We've got our knob to adjust for our bore diameter of the ring. And we've got a stop that we can butt the ring up against every time. And then we've got a little indicator that we can set up in 0 to measure how much we're cutting off. So I've got the ring filer set up, and we will grind some rings. So now we'll bring our ring back and put it into our cylinder this time. And see, we got it in all the way this time. We can take our feeler gauges. Now we can actually measure what this gap is. So we got an 18 in there, 18 thousandths, if you can see that. So we just have to take our another 15, and that should put us there. So now that we got our first ring set up and we know exactly how much it took to get us to our gap, we can set up and we can just run through all the other top rings and get them roughed in pretty close and put them in here, double check. May still have to tweak a few thousandths off the rings just to get the gap right, but at least we can rough them in and get them a lot closer, a little bit quicker than trying to do this one at a time. Alright, so we got all our rings set, gap set on them. We got them hanging on our ring board. That's numbered to show each individual cylinder. That way we can make sure that they're gapped to each cylinder. Just in case there are any differences, typically we have 1, maybe 2 tenths of variance between them. We try to keep them fairly tight. We're getting ready to install our cam. Then we can get on with putting the crank in, and your rods, pistons together, rings on them, and then get those dropped in the block. So I'll just kind of set y'all up so y'all can kind of see how we put the cam in. We typically start with it dry just to make sure that it goes in and it can spin. There's no tight spots or anything like that. Then we'll slide it out a little bit. We can put a lube on there and then put it in for good. Got our crank put in there, everything spins nicely. We got all the bolts paint marked just so we can keep track of all the bolts that have been torqued, that way one doesn't get forgotten. So next we're going to work on cleaning our rings and getting the pistons onto the rods, and then we get the rings on the pistons, then it'd be putting them into the block. So one thing I want to touch on, the rings may seem clean just like our bearings are. You always want to take and clean them. We use Lycra thinner for everything on all our final cleaning, just to remove any kind of grease, dirt, anything that may be on that ring. And then we also try to go back and remove any kind of lint that may have gotten on there. But we try to use lint-free rags just so that there's less chance of getting lint on there, because anything that gets in that ring groove can stick a ring, and that's obviously bad. So we want to make sure that everything spins freely, everything's lubed up nicely, and obviously clean before it all goes together. So you can see that the rings are pretty dirty once you actually clean them with a rag. That's just for one cylinder. So we still got 7 other cylinders to do. That would be a lot of dirt and contamination in the engine, so we want to avoid all that. So we've got the rotating assembly and everything in the block. Everything's torqued and set up. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to work on getting our cam in time. Just double check the timing where it's installed at, make sure it's where it's supposed to be. Just because on race stuff like this, clearances and everything start to become a lot tighter, so we want to make sure that it's where it's supposed to be at, and then we can double check our piston valve clearance and stuff like that later on to verify that we're not having any kind of contact and that we've got the proper clearance built into it. So I'll set y'all up. We'll go through that process so y'all can see how we go about degreeing the cam and just verifying that it's where it's supposed to be. So I just made a little mark here, just show our 0 point. So we have our 0 keyway with our key, then there's a tooth with a 0 on it, so we want to make sure that that is the tooth that we're lining up our cam with. I like to take my cam gear, bolt in there, just kind of hold it. Then I can take our dot and rotate that around till we line up. That way I know when I put my timing gear or cam gear on there, I know that we should be lined up dot to dot for the first check. Now we got it tight, we can take our degree wheel with our socket, and we want to kind of pay attention over here, like this, so that you might can see it, to our where our piston's at. We want to find, so it looks to be pretty close to 0 actually. I did not plan that. So we found where it looks to be top dead center. So we can get our degree wheel kind of close. We can get our pointer set up. To our 0 mark. So what we're going to do is we want to back the engine up, and we're going to pick this 80 so that we're 20 thousandths from the top. And at 80 we're at 7 degrees before top dead center, and we'll go back to the same number, 80, and see that we are 8 degrees past. So we want to split the difference, and 7 and 8 would be 7.5. So I can take and move the pointer to 7.5, and then we'll back up and we will verify. And you always want to keep forward tension, direction of forward rotation of the engine, because as you can see there is some movement there, which my degree will just come loose. But you can see how it rocks a little bit. So that's why you always want to keep pressure in the direction of rotation going forward, like the engine would be running clockwise. That way every time you check, you take out any of that slop. So we'll back up and verify again, especially since our wheel come loose. Just over 7. Just over 7. So we're probably within a 1/4 degree. It's plenty close enough. Really, as long as you can get within 1/2 to 1 degree, you're plenty fine. So at this point, we can set this indicator right here up. This one. It's on the intake lobe of the cam, and we will turn the engine over until we get the max lift. I think, there we go. Okay, so it's going down. So that's max lift. So we're going to do the exact same thing as we did with the setting TDC to find our intake center line. So we can use 80 again. We are 86 degrees after top dead center. So we'll go back to our 80 number. And that is 138. So we can add those two numbers together. So we got 86 plus 138 is 224. Then we divide that by 2, and it gives us an intake center line of 112. So currently, dot to dot puts our intake center line at 112. Cam card, you can see down here it says degree intake lobe to 113. So we're within a degree, and on these timing sets here, the keyway on the crank gear is 2 degrees. So if we moved it 2 degrees, it would be 114. So either way, we can't hit 113. So we'll stay with 112 where it's at. Now we can take our degree wheel off. And then we will take one cam bolt out at a time, put some Loctite on there, put them back in there, torque them, and our cam will be set. So that's all there is to degreeing the cam. So at this point we'll move on. We'll check our deck height, which is how much the piston is sticking out or into the cylinder, to know what that clearance is. They help us in figuring out compression ratio, as well as just knowing where it's at, and we can also see if the block's straight, things like that. Alright guys, it just about does it for the short block. Next video we'll be going over our cylinder heads. I'll walk you through doing a valve job on them, checking our install height, setting our valve springs to get the core bind clearance right, and getting seeing what our valve spring pressures are. We'll also be going over grounded valves and assembly of the heads. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.